What's up, guys? George Balekji here with Boston has entered the chat. But hey, check out the latest episode of Foxborough Rush. Sean McGuire and I run through the latest for the Patriots with Stephon Diggs taking a visit. The new reports of Cam Robinson, interested in the Pats, but just preferred Houston and what that really means. And then we have our latest mock draft as well. Free agency has come and gone. We have a better idea of their roster. But now the real fun mocks happen with the draft just over a month out. That's Foxborough Rush, wherever you get your podcast, Spotify, Apple, Amazon Prime. You can also watch on YouTube. Now let's get to the chat. All right. It's Boston has entered the chat. George Balekji here with Kasey Hudson. Case, what's up?
Not too much. It's been a chill couple of days, enjoying the warmer weather.
This is warm.
This
warm. Time of year. Welcome.
I'm becoming that person where I tell my parents, hey, it's a warm day. And
yes.
they're like, what's the temperature? 43 degrees. But it's been great. We've got a lot of fun college hockey. You got to be on the ground for that. And
yeah, that was fun at the Hockey East.
A lot of movement taking place, getting closer to draft. So
yeah,
it's been good stuff. Tried to stay awake for F1, but you and I will get into that later.
Yes, we'll be talking about that. And doesn't matter how early you watch the race because Ferrari bungled it well after it was done too. We'll be talking some F1. We'll talk Patriots, what they should do with the draft, and also talking some Red Sox. Where does everything stand with Garrett Crochet, along with taking a quick look ahead for them having that 2-game exhibition series in Mexico as well. I want to start with real quick. You mentioned it, like Hockey East wrapped up. Shout out to that conference. Oof. BC got number 1 seed. Providence is in that region. UMass, BU, UConn, and Maine all got in.
Right.
6 schools. That ties for most Hockey East schools to make it into the Frozen Four championship.
Big representation out of New England.
Yeah.
It's serious up here.
BC with the 1 seed. Maine got the number 3 overall too. And then I'm excited. That BU Ohio State matchup is going to be good. And then UConn Quinnipiac, obviously a Connecticut matchup. That one going down in the Allentown region. It's going to be really good. I have no idea who's going to win it. All those teams are capable from watching them.
Yeah, it's fun because I got to chat with Natalie weeks back about like what team she low-key wants to keep a closer eye on. And she mentioned Providence. And like to think, it says Providence going against Denver, right?
Yeah, they have Denver in the Manchester. So UNH is hosting and they have them in the Manchester region.
Yeah, so there's some good, like, sneaky fun teams that can probably get into the mix here. I always think back when the Frozen Four was in Tampa a couple years ago. That's when Quinnipiac won it, and everybody was like, first of all, I can't even pronounce the school, let alone root for them. But, yeah, I can't wait to see how that all plays out. And I feel like BC just kind of has this, like, wicked chip on their shoulder right now because they don't like how some of the games have played out over the course of the last month. So when you've got a team like that in the hunt and they're already seated so high, we're going to see some great play, I think. Yeah.
I mean, for the game they dropped against in the Bean Pot, that was them getting pushed around just better. And then the one that they dropped against Northeastern in the Hockey East quarterfinals, I mean, it was like you could look at 2 shifts. It was shift changes. It was simple mistakes. Northeastern was able to capitalize, but they have the goalie in Jacob Fowler. They obviously have all the talent with those forwards. They have the NHL guys. Maine, I just still give. They're really deep, really good goaltender play. Really experienced and old in the right ways. Like they have a bunch of 24-year-olds.
Okay.
And it's just something special there. And Albin Boya, their goaltender, that guy's good. BU having Mike Yegorov. Like they have the goaltenders, and of course BC with Jacob Fowler like that. I trust can carry them.
Yeah,
you know?
I was gonna ask you about that because you got to be a part of like 2 really sick experiences, seeing BC kind of fly high there for a minute, and then Maine. But I mean, just to see the turnout for everyone rooting for Maine last week.
Yeah, it was like 80% in the Garden.
It was dumb. I mean, Maine just completely relocated to the Garden, but it was really cool to see. But like, which team have you enjoyed kind of like covering closer? In terms of like those high intensity tournaments and situations?
Man, that's a good question.
Yeah, because the highlights coming out of Maine, like, were dumb.
Every school has their great storylines. Like I have a really good relationship with Northeastern, NBC. I've gotten to build good relationships with the BU peeps too, and Harvard, like that. So I'm just giving you like they're all my favorite children.
Very diplomatic of you.
What made Maine unique was it was historic. It was the first Hockey East championship with no Massachusetts school since 2002.
Ooh.
And Maine's first Hockey East tournament championship since 2004. And it was also big of, like, Nolan Renwick said it. He scored the game-winning goal in double OT the night before. He's like, when I first got there, we won 4 games. Now we're winning the Hockey East.
Oof.
Lyndon Breen was very emotional because Red Gendron, the previous head coach, obviously passed away, and that's what led to Ben Barr taking the job. Lyndon was a Red Gendron guy, played for him as a freshman, so it meant a lot to him. And I think when you see that support, because normally And I get it. Like BC, when they won the Hockey East, we're doing the interviews. Everyone's in the locker room celebrating. I understand it 1,000%. Maine stayed on the ice because the fans would not leave in a good way of like they were just kept cheering them on, soaking in the moment. So I definitely think with the uniqueness of that scene and that magnitude, that's what made it really cool for Maine to win it.
Yeah, that's a perfect way to have a little bit of a, I don't want to call it an edge or a leg up, but it changes the magnitude of the experience.
Yeah.
And plus, there's been so much conversation around BC, not to take away from why, but to think that they stayed on the ice because of the fans and then the emotional altitude of all of that, I would have definitely become one of my favorite moments.
I enjoy it. They play really well. They're high scoring, but they play so physical. And it's the true like 200-foot game. Like their forecheck is very technical, very just thought out, very polished. And they have the upperclassmen leadership. They have the good skaters. Taylor McCarr had 2 goals. Yes, brother of Cale McCarr, but he's just like at his size is the best skater on the ice with his elite speed. And it's just how they built out that roster. And as we saw last year, like BC made it all the way. And Denver was kind of the BC of the West. And then they switched their game to be more physical and forecheck heavy when it came to the tournament. And that kind of stunned BC in the championship game. It's going to be exciting to watch.
Yeah, that's what I mean by like we don't know where the leg up is actually going to play. Is going to
cannot
play
make
into it. And a lot of brothers in the mix that need to pave their own way. Like McCarr's going to make a statement for himself, but then you've got like the Hudson brothers over at BU.
Quinn and Cole.
Exactly. So like I love all the brother narratives that are tying in now to the league as a whole. You're just seeing so much more of it.
UMass even sneaking in there too. They got Minnesota. That's going to be the tough one too. Really good.
Don't be mad at me, Massachusetts, but when I got into college hockey, it was
because of the Gophers.
Yeah,
nice.
yeah. I went to Minnesota during their high school tournament in St. Paul. Saw how like neurotic fans are for high school hockey in Massachusetts. Changed my life. They had a whole expo underneath the St. Paul Arena, and then ended up going to a couple Gophers games after that, and it was a wrap for me.
There you go.
So,
hey, whatever to root for them. I like it. All right, so let's get into talking Patriots. Enough talking hockey, but that was a fun combo too. I don't know, you'll be talking about that on Hockey Hub a little more.
Yep, we'll have more college hockey coming at you.
There you go. Make sure to check that out. So the Patriots. We're going to find all different ways to talk about this, but there's so many different avenues that can happen to them for the draft. They have the number 4 pick, and as everything's going through on free agency, their offensive line upgraded in a way of like they have a starting right tackle. David Andrews was cut. They bring in Garrett Bradbury. He's definitely more healthy, not as good of a player, but right now they just need reliable and in the lineup, and it sounds like Garrett Bradbury gives them that. Mm-hmm. Number 4 pick, though, Patriots couldn't get a wide receiver in Chris Godwin. Couldn't get a left tackle in Cam Robinson. So now it's all the question marks are, what do they do with 4? Now, Will Campbell will be there. You assume either Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter will be there. Mm-hmm. But a lot can change where neither are there. So that's what the big question is of like, what are the pros of sticking at 4? What are the cons, and of course, if they move, it'd be trading back. There's so much up in the air around it. I'm curious about it. I think if Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter are not there, you trade back no matter what. Oh. Because you either you have your pick of the litter, Will Campbell, Armand Membu, or let's say Josh Simmons at 4, if they want to go left tackle. But you trade back, and if you stay within the top 10, you should still get one of those 3.
True. And
that's where they have to know of, all right, what is Armand Membu? Can he make the switch from the right side to left? I think he can. He's still really new to football, but he's so fluid and athletic and is so explosive as an athlete. Josh Simmons is the best left tackle. Will Campbell's the best overall lineman, but we just don't know if he could be a left tackle. When you're looking at number 4, what do you think when you read the whole situation for the Pats?
Reading the whole situation, it makes me think that they wouldn't trade back out of that spot, only because you talk about some of the talent that's reachable at that spot, and you kind of feel like you have to make a move. But granted, like when you discuss, as you just did, like those names and the potential offensive line additions, you don't have to grab them at 1. You can add to your pocket by trading for 1. And then on top of it, they seem to be curtailing the kind of roster that has more of a plug and play format versus like we have to get this guy in this name. You know what I mean? Yeah. So like if that tends to be the theme that they continue to ride with, then they could trade back out. But I don't see it per se. Like everything's lining up to where it seems very reasonable. 2 quarterbacks go off in the beginning, and then you're really dancing between Carter and Hunter. And the conversation is just kind of like illuminating to the idea of Hunter coming in. I've talked about it with you. I've talked about it with Travis. And as much as I like the idea of Travis Hunter and a generational talent coming in, I think I'm swaying a little bit now that we're getting closer. Because we're talking cornerback heavy. Mm-hmm. We're talking about that great interview you guys had with Sycamore where he's like, look, I would just throw him in at CB and just like sit with it for a minute. And then, of course, there would just be a package in terms of wide receiver. But they need somebody for Drake May, number one. Number two, you can't have a quality quarterback without protection in front of him. Yeah. And we're not seeing that picture being painted out here. So if that be the case and the focus does go to the offensive line, second round, you can grab your guy without putting yourself out. And you work off of a plug-and-play system versus grabbing a flashy name.
Yeah, definitely when they add a Morgan Moses. He's 34. He's reliable. He's durable. But that's a 2-year solution at right tackle. Mm-hmm. That's a guy you bring in now. Maybe Caden Wallace continues to, develop behind him. Maybe it's someone that they draft this year. Garrett Bradbury's the same thing. You can take a rookie, let him sit if it's a Jake Majors, or maybe he could play right away. Or if it's a Seth McLaughlin, has to recover from an injury, and then he'll be ready next year. Mm-hmm. I just go back to, like, if Travis Hunter's there or Abdul Carter's there, those guys, their potential is way too high to pass up on.
Yeah.
If they're there at 4, one or the other, they take them. If they're both gone, that's what I think opens up the situation or the possibility of them trading back. Like, if they stick at 4, they get their guy no matter what.
Yeah.
If they trade back, and let's say they go back to 9 with the Saints, I don't think it's going to happen. I think the Saints sit back, and if it's Jackson Dart or Shedeur Sanders, it falls to them, they end up going that route. But let's say they go to 9. Armand Membu is very likely to go top 6. I think Josh Simmons could end up possibly going in the top 8 as well. I think Will Campbell could still fall to them. Then it's also, but there's also the Kelvin Banks out there. Like, he has a length. He's a good left tackle, started in the SEC. I really like him as a prospect. Like, that's there as well. And then if they trade back, and it depends what the price could be, but if it's a first, a second, and maybe a day 2 pick next year, you all of a sudden have 2 seconds. That's when you can maybe trade back into the first, get the receiver that you want. Mm-hmm. Double dip, get 2 receivers in the second, maybe go edge. I just think what's important is they've revamped the defense. In the draft, though, like, that's when you can really reset the roster and set yourself up for success, where you can't spend like this in free agency every year. So if they get a pillar position in an edge rusher, wide receiver, offensive tackle in the first round, do the same thing with the second round, one of those 3 positions, and maybe double dip. Then you have your quarterback, you have your left tackle, your wide receiver, and edge rusher, all cost control the next 4 years. Like, that's what's important for them. That's why I'm happy they stuck. I was saying, maybe they trade back, get more picks. You could get the 12th and the 21st if they traded with the Texans, I believe, or it was the Vikings, I forget. But they could have done that. Mm-hmm. I'm happy they stuck because they got the guy in Drake May. This is a draft where if Hunter and Abdul Carter aren't there, it's a good draft. It's just you don't have those guys worth the price of a top 5 as much, but there still are a lot of NFL players in this draft.
Yeah, I think the margin changes once you get beyond a Carter and a Hunter. So you don't have to make the jump on it. And like you said, you add some value to your pockets. I love the take of the fact that, like, you have those entry-level contracts. You're not putting yourself out financially, and then you're really committing to the rebuild side of things. Yeah. But there's still worthy grabs as you work through the draft. So say round 2, or like if you drop down, you grab your offensive lineman or left tackle per se. Well, in terms of a couple of the handful of wide receivers that are going to fall to that second and third round, those are guys, again, back to the plug and play method, that'll slot in decently, have the football IQ per se to where they're trainable, and then they can come into the mix. I mean, you're also hearing about, they call him T-Mac, but McMillan kind of being more of a viable option, and they are still room in the free agency to make that kind of move to where you'll get a veteran presence out there as well as kind of like a second or third round wide receiver. Yeah. But I agree. You don't give up a Hunter or a Carter if it falls down to you. I just think that they have wiggle room and they're not kind of like cuffed to the fact of having to make a move if both of those guys are off the board.
Yeah. Ted McMillan, I'm so divided on. Like, I like him as a prospect, but I think same thing. I'd rather take, like, I would go Matthew Golden over him. I'd go Emeka Egbuka over him. And then if they're both gone.
Why Egbuka? Because slot?
I just think his versatility, good route running. I just think he's just more of like a pro. The question mark of McMillan, his length, and he doesn't have the biggest frame. Like, you're 6'5", that's a big amount of space for cornerbacks to get their hands on you. Mm-hmm. Like, you can't protect that frame as much. And it's just that size doesn't always translate. Like 6'3", that's where you want to be. That's kind of the cutoff of like a more guaranteed hit. And it sounds funny, it's just an inch, but when you get to 6'4", 6'5", like a lot can change at that point, you know? And he just doesn't have the thickness of a Drake London. He has a style of play, but he doesn't have the thickness where that's why Drake London at that size, or Mike Evans, same thing.
Or he can manage his frame.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And again, it's like if Josh Simmons is there, if Membu's there, if Will Campbell's there, if Kelvin Banks is there, after they trade back and they're in the top 10, like I would rather go tackle at that spot. And I just like the second, third round receivers, Jalen Noel, Jaden Higgins, maybe Elika Yomenor. I think he's more of a development piece. And then even the guys like Xavier Restrepo, Jack Besh, like they can just fill out the wide receiver room. And so they could get the depth. What I like is like we talk pros and cons. Let's say like the Colts at 14, that's a team I like look at, where if you can get the 14th from them, Josh Downs, who was a third-round pick and would be a really fast slot and a former teammate of Drake May in the UNC days, very productive for the awful quarterback play he's been dealt with since he got into the NFL. If you go first, Josh Downs, let's say a fourth and maybe a day 2 next year, to move up from 14 to 4, 10 spots, I would take that trade, because then it goes into the 14 then. You can go with a left tackle at that spot. Maybe it's a Josh Connerly, maybe it's an Arante Ursary, or maybe it still is a possibility of a Will Campbell or Kelvin Banks being
right. I don't hate that, but I'm also leaning into it because of the connection. Because, again, Vrabel's approach here is relationship, connection, and then you're establishing an already built connection between May and a former teammate. But, okay, so while we're playing devil's advocate, another thing that's being kicked around conversationally is with Metcalf being at the Steelers, that Pickens can be kind of swapped out for conversation around the draft as a trade piece in the mix of things. How would you feel about him being plugged into this system?
No, he's too much of a head case. I just think he's just too much of a distraction. And that's where you have to be very smart with the guys that you're putting in a wide receiving room.
And you don't think he was temperamental because of his quarterback situation?
He was, but it's also like he would just make dumb plays. Like dropping passes, then he gets pissed off and it causes him to spiral. Like Mike Vrabel is a Mike Tomlin-esque if he can reel him in. I think he's so volatile.
More work than necessary.
Yeah, what's the price? Definitely wouldn't give up a first. Maybe a second, but again, it would just be like, what am I getting with George Pickens? Where on the opposite end, like Garrett Wilson with the Jets, I don't think they end up trading him. I would trade the 4th overall pick for Garrett Wilson. I would, because that in this draft, you will not get someone as good as Garrett Wilson. And this is, again, if Travis Hunter, Abdul Carter are gone, that could be something where it's a big swing on draft day that happens. Like, remember, A.J. Brown deal happened on draft day. So that's when this stuff can go down. I wouldn't want to give up a draft asset for George Pickens. I just don't like what I've seen. And it's like, I understand the quarterback play. That's like, and that is an aspect in all this, but he's also with Mike Tomlin. And Mike Tomlin's good at managing personalities, and he can tolerate George Pickens. I wouldn't want him here. Young locker room, I don't want him.
Really?
No.
Okay.
You like him? He's a great player. No. He's a phenomenal football player.
Right. And but
there's a lot that goes into it.
We started to see better towards the mid and end of the Steelers season with Russell Wilson.
But there were still those flashes late in the year. It's just like the immaturity there.
Yes. So that's where I was going with this, actually. Thank you for hopping in my brain yet again, George.
Gotcha.
So the immaturity, I think you come to a team that has a young quarterback that's progressively moving forward. You're looking to build a team around the pieces that you're bringing in. Yeah. He's going to feel a sense of, I don't want to say leadership, but I think he's just going to feel a different sense of necessity to his play and stuff. There's a lot of this earn your job, earn your keep at the Steelers, because there was so much swapping out. There were so many veterans, and maybe he didn't feel like much of a leadership presence coming from any of those veterans. There was so much drama around the quarterback conversation. So being in something a little bit more, I want to say tame, crazy enough, then you've got a speakable coach in Vrabel. You've got a young quarterback that you're not going to try to push over on. You can actually build a reliable relationship with. If the room is more young, I think that his immaturity is not going to stand out as much, and maybe he will mature in the way that he's expected to. Yeah. But some of those plays could be useful for the Patriots. That's for sure.
Yeah, again, I would take him over. I would take him over every receiver in this draft minus Matthew Golden. I just think, again, if you're giving up that second rounder, though, you have to know everything about him. Yeah, it's the personality, and that's what stinks.
Right.
He's good, but I don't think he transcends you're not going to find another prospect like him. Maybe not this draft, but it could be in the next. I think eventually you could have that George Pickens where like what Drake May worked with this offense. Again, if he was just like fine, I don't need excellent. I just think the ups and downs. And he's going from a situation with the Steelers where it's like winning seasons, good head coach, cusp of playoffs are getting in, to the Patriots. This is going to be a 3-year rebuild, and I just don't love that, you know?
You don't trust that he would be coming in and have the patience for that. Okay.
Patience, it's a maturity. And like from day one, like Vrabel said, like I will treat you how you treat the team. It's just I just think he sees that and there go the risk reward not worth it as compared to other guys.
All right.
You know? Hey, we got some good comments on YouTube. I want to shout out Andy Rule 988. How much would it take to trade up to 2? So he's throwing out there a trade up. We're talking trade backs. If we really want him, go up and make sure you get him. Talking about Travis Hunter. That would probably, because you're going up, and that would be the Browns at 2. I would think this year's first, next year's second, maybe, which for Travis Hunter would be worth it. But if there becomes a bidding war, because you have to go over a team, it could be like a first, a third.
I was going to say, it can get a little out of hand
first,
for
maybe
two
it's
slot.
2 firsts.
Yeah.
And Travis Hunter is great, but then that like weighs it of rather roll the dice. And if you're like, we can go with the Travis Hunter, Abdul Carter falling to us. From 4 to 2 is not a huge leap. But that's also a slot where someone would draft a quarterback. And like, that's where you're taking.
100%.
And that's where that can drive up the price.
Exactly.
I like that question, though.
Exactly. Like, because of what has always been established in the draft for those top 2 picks, I think it's just going to get a little costly. Not to say that Travis Hunter is not worth it. I just don't think that I don't think he's circled that hard on the Patriots board. Like, you know what I mean? He's not sitting in all caps on the board in the war room in terms to make the kind of moves that they would have to go to that 2 spot.
If they had a player they can trade, I'd feel a lot better than that than going a lot of picks.
Right.
If it was this, like the 4th, and man, I just think if he had a better year, but like Kyle Duggar wouldn't drive for that. Maybe if it was a Keon White, if he was better. Maybe if like a Josh Uche was better and still on the team. Like, guys in that aspect, or say if they just had a better receiver, I think it would make sense. But still,
and think of the 2 names that you're talking about that you'd be moving out of the top 2 spots. Ward's numbers this past season are just insane.
Yeah.
And then you're talking about Shador, which is just like, again, like the brand aspect that comes into all of this. If you're going to maneuver around a branded name coming into the draft, they're going to be able to drive things up a little too much.
That's what, now if Cam Ward goes one of the Titans and then it's like Shador, Jackson, Dart, and then hands up, it's also, that'd be the Browns being willing to pass on Abdul Carter and Travis Hunter too. That's the thing. Those are the generational guys. Quarterbacks next year, we don't know enough about an Arch Manning. Drew Aller, I'm not sure, but that's where it is. I like that hypothetical. One from Jack958. He's a freak talent, yeah, best player in the draft, but is he the best cornerback or wide receiver in the draft? I don't want him based on the glaring needs of the team. Sure, he'll have a good career, but we need pieces. I think he's the best wide receiver. I think he's the best corner.
Really?
Yeah, he's just a phenomenal athlete. Now, in the same way where I would give up number 4 for Garrett Wilson. Like, Travis Hunter is Garrett Wilson as a receiver. The question is, you have to talk about his durability. Bigger, faster, stronger is the NFL. Is he going to be playing 60 snaps a game? Is he going to be playing like 30 on offense, full workload on defense? And can he make it through that and then you get a long career? I don't know.
Right.
But his upside as a receiver, I would take him at 4. And that's where I would be fine going.
As a receiver?
Yes.
Okay.
Purely as a receiver, I would take him number 4. And then you throw in the aspect if he can be a cornerback.
Oh.
I really love Travis Hunter, and
that's
again, I just
a
can't
play.
pass up on him.
I'm going complete opposite.
It's hard to throw someone into 2 at cornerback, but if you're going to go pure man defense on the outside, just everyone like your communication has to be pristine to him. Everyone has to be on the same page. I think it could work. What were you thinking?
I'm thinking first round cornerback. And then maybe a little bit of drop off wide receiver. And I only say that because as much faith as I have in this generational talent, you learn a lot about the reacclimatization and pace of the NFL. Like him being able to play out west, have this duality to his role, his versatility. Like once you get into the NFL, the pace of the NFL, the contact of the NFL, and then the packaging and stuff, like you have to wrap your mind around so much more wide receiver wise. And then sometimes McDaniels can have a little bit of an intricate playbook at his hand as well. So considering all of that, I'd go round 1 for CB for Hunter, and then like maybe a little bit of drop off when it comes to wide receiver comparisons.
Yeah. No, I like it. I like that. Hey, if you want to stream the entire Sox season with an NESN 360 annual plan, it's available at an all-new reduced price of just $20 a month paid annually. And for a limited time, get 4 free tickets to Fenway with your purchase. Visit NESN360.com to sign up today. All right, Sox season around the corner where you can watch on NESN 360. So before they get to opening day, March 27th, they also have a pair of exhibition games in Monterrey, Mexico against the Sultanes de Monterrey. Monday, 9:10 p.m. East Coast time, first pitch. Then Thursday, 7:10 p.m. first pitch. But before we get to the opening day, there's some updates in the Garrett Crochet extension talks. And it is reportedly less than likely that Crochet will sign an extension before opening day. This was discussed with Garrett Crochet. He said this to Mass Live and Chris Cotillo. Then there were new reports coming out again that they're like really far apart, basically the Red Sox and Crochet. Kind of concerning, not panic button. I think this is just the nature of negotiations and how they go. Crochet is about to go into his first full season as a starter, as an ace, on a good team. And sure, he wants to get paid and get that long-term financial security. But if he gets paid now, he's passing up on what the possibilities could be if he proves himself as a starting pitcher right now.
Yeah, and I think I'm right there with you on not hitting the panic button because, again, still getting acclimated with Boston. But what I have come to, I think I learned, is that the Red Sox aren't jumping at approaches with anything. I mean, look back to kind of like the drag out's probably not the right word, but kind of like the cautious conversation around the Bregman contract. Like he wanted a long-term deal and he left term as well as money on the table to be a part of the Red Sox organization. So that's where the panic dial is down for me. I'm sure ideally we have this concept in our mind of locking players in before getting seasons going because it just adds to the futility of their play. It puts their mind at rest. All they have to do is focus on the game, but it's not like his contract is up, at the end of this season. They still have some time. I think the term of large gap in the negotiation conversation is what tends to be more alarming. Yeah. But outside of it, I don't think that there's any panic here. I think you said it. I mean, first be coming in as a starter, first time kind of having this task at hand. You have to see how it plays out in order to see because the market has changed drastically in the past year. So you have to be smart about this. You can't just jump on ship with the rest of these other teams around the country and be like, we're going to throw money at a situation and not know how things are going to pan out because injuries have kind of eradicated a number of these contracts and money that's now tangled up and hurt.
Yeah, when he was talking with Chris Cotillo again back in February, he said, this was something he said to him. He said, I quote, I think that the long-term security is definitely something attractive. As players, we want to look out for our family first. But last year being my first taste of starting, part of me also wants to see what I could do with the full season of innings workload. Part of me wants to see what I could do in a full season before locking myself into a certain bracket of a player. So that says to me where to go. And this is how all negotiations start. Like the Red Sox or any team for that matter, don't come in right away and offer the full value. Like, the team has to look out for themselves. The player has to look out for themselves, and they meet in the middle. It's every negotiation, even outside of sports. The Red Sox are probably coming to him with negotiations or more of his agent in this process and going, here's the money, here are the injuries, here's a question mark, but long-term security will give him this now. And it's probably more team-friendly where he wants to get that like Max Fried-esque type deal. Lefty making 30, 35, and maybe get ahead of the market where he'd be wanting to make between 35 and 40 million a year. So that's where I think before locking myself into a certain bracket of a player, that's what that says to me. Because a bracket, he's locking himself into an unproven ace where he wants to be a proven ace. Okay,
because I was going to say the numbers that you just mentioned there, like in terms of what I was seeing could potentially qualify for what they've seen and what they're hoping to see out of him. Like you're looking at comparisons to $28 million a year. So looking at 30 to 35 on that prove it just tells you like how much this can all change out for sure, depending on what we see, depending on what he continues to want after having this time. The long term of it though, like what are you hearing in terms of like how many years that he wants to lock in?
I would assume that it would be something around like a 7-year benchmark. And that's because this is a guy that is young, is really talented, just a question of durability. And it's for him, the durability, it's been his surgeries that he's had. And then the acclimation period of getting back into the ramp up of being a starting pitcher, and to a point of being on an innings count by the White Sox when he was there. Like, he couldn't do it. They didn't want him to. So they're protecting an asset in a way of what his trade value eventually was, which got high-end prospects from the Red Sox and that. But I would just imagine it would be something of like 5 to 7 years, and it would be between 30 to 35 million a year. This is what I imagine. And Sam Kennedy, he went on WEI during a game the other day, and this is what he said in the booth. He said he and his family, Garrett Crochet and his family, need to decide, is Boston where they want to be? And as the three of us in the booth he was talking here, no, it's not for everybody. So he's just going a little bit of like expectations, pressure, media coverage, all of that. But the second part was more significant. I think given his mindset and makeup, he'll have a lot of success here if that's what he chooses. We are making it a priority to try and extend a lot of our own players that are currently under control, and he would fit into that category. Excited about conversations there, but we don't want to push too hard and rush it if it's not the right time for him. So that's Sam Kennedy going, we want to extend him now. The guys that are under cost control, which they've done this with a Brian Bayo, with a Cedane Rafaela. They got out of arbitration with Jarren Duran. I'm sure they're going to be working on that with him as well. But it's the guys that, before they even really need to give him an extension, they are. Garrett Crochet is that. I think at the end of, we don't want to push too hard in Russia if it's not the right time for him. That's where Sam Kennedy goes, we're making it a priority. We're exploring that possibility, but also like we're going to let Crochet work on his timeline as well. And this is something like it can work out for the Red Sox.
Right.
It could backfire in a way of, if he goes out and is that horse and does 200 innings pitched, continues to perform at the level that he can, and is that ace and performs in the postseason, that's what would get him like paid.
Oh yeah, big time. But I guess that's what's going to make it more worth it. I didn't think about it from the player perspective of like, is this the right fit in market in terms of like his performance and stuff?
I think that's kind of like Sam Kennedy, when he says that, I think Garrett Crochet is a fit. I think he's throwing out there of like, it is different here.
The other avenues that can play into the price of everything. Yeah. I would say I saw 8 different starting quarterbacks. They're sitting at $27.8 million on average of time per year or paid per year. But is the payout on the back end an option for a guy like Crochet, you think?
You mean like the
after contract incentives and everything else kind of pile in and kind of add to the value that he particularly is picturing now? 5 years payout on the back end.
I think he would just... In baseball, it's all fully guaranteed. And with that, you know, like Bregman in a way has the deferred payments that he could get and the options and everything as well. So no matter what the money would be there, I just think it would be AAV and length of terms, you know? I think it would be like total money of the contract. And then again, going into his market value, like Fried was $28 million a year. Yeah. That's a lefty ace. All right, can I get to 30, 32 a year? And then there is also the part of like you want to get ahead of the market because
it's going to reset again.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Someone's going to be making 35, then eventually Garrett Crochet will be a bargain, but it's helping yourself out now and in the long term and helping too.
All right. Would you pay him?
I would. I think he's fantastic. I think he's absolutely fantastic. And then a quick one, Buster Olney, more look ahead for the Red Sox. He's reported that Christian Campbell is a leader in the clubhouse to start at second base, talking about opening day here. Now, there is David Hamilton. Marcelo Meyer's been floated to play second. Vaughn Grissom's been optioned to AAA Worcester, but Buster Olney putting this out. I think this makes a ton of sense. Majority of his games when he's been in the minors for the Red Sox have been at second base. Majority of his games when he was at Georgia Tech, he was drafted out of college at second base. Sick athlete, can play outfield as well. Everyone's looking at his batting average. He started out terrible in spring training. He was like 0.95 batting average. Now he's up to 157, so it shows the tear that he's been on. I think it makes sense because people go, well, like David Hamilton's a pro. Christian Campbell's ceiling is so much higher than a David Hamilton. I think the Red Sox, again, it's now versus future conversation they have. If Christian Campbell can be better, you want him to get the at-bats in the majors right now. You want him to be at second base to help his development. Exactly. Compared to like David Hamilton is David Hamilton.
Yeah.
And I think that's what goes into this. And it's the same thing with the Vaughn Grissom. Like, has potential... But if Christian Campbell with a higher ceiling and you think he can succeed, you go with that guy.
Yeah, I think Campbell's making a case in the sense of like the steady progression that he's had through training camp. And like you just said, get him the reps now. But what better time to figure out if he can handle it, the workload, than in the beginning of the season than to try to kind of use him second half of the season and have him pop in. Like Hamilton is a utility guy. So if things go south, pull him in, help him reel everybody out. But for the most part, I think Campbell's proving that his progress is right on track to be an asset for this team. He was one of the names kind of kicked around for opening day roster potential. Yep. So I think that everything that's happening in spring training and the games over the course of the last 48 hours or over the weekend have proven that he can withstand.
I think, and it's interesting, if he's a leader in second base, then it's, all right, where's Bregman playing?
That whole drama.
Yeah, and
not
so
drama, but the dance.
No, but it is. It is. It's drama. It's competition, which is good. The exhibition series, there is no Garrett Crochet on that roster. There will be no Rafael Devers either. So Bregman, Meyer, Christian Campbell, Jaron Duran, Roman Anthony, Tristan Casas, they'll be traveling out there. Again, those are exhibition games. I doubt Bregman's going to play all that much.
Yeah.
This is something that was set up by MLB. And for the Red Sox, they're going to go right from Mexico to their opening series in Texas as well. So that's how it's going to be. So if Christian Campbell is playing second and Alex Bregman is playing third in Mexico, that doesn't necessarily mean that'd be Alex Bregman playing third to open the season, because Rafael Devers is simply not going to be on the roster, which isn't anything crazy because, again, Garrett Crochet will not be on the roster as well for those Mexico games.
And injuries are causing some change arounds too. I mean, there's certain guys that you don't have to throw out come opening day or opening up the series in Texas. You can wait on it a little bit, and then we'll see where those positions lie.
I think it's also just travel workload before you get into the regular season, because there'll be the 2 games in Mexico. It's international travel too, going into Mexico, coming back into the States, and then it'll be a 4-game series in Texas. That one starts on the 27th on Thursday. Mm-hmm. Then the Orioles, and then they come home for their home opener as well. That one will be April 4th on a Friday. So that's where it's managing the workload. Rangers, Orioles, divisional rival. Then you have the Cardinals at home before you play the Blue Jays too.
Hey, at least you have the depth. At least the depth is there. That's a whole different conversation to know that you're going into a season with depth and a higher expectation and maybe potentially even a ceiling. Yeah.
And remember, so Monday 9:10 East Coast time, Tuesday night 7:10 East Coast time again. Red Sox playing exhibition games in Mexico. You can catch that all on NESN. The Red Sox opening day is just 3 days away, and everyone is watching closely to see if this team is playoff bound. We know you have a lot of questions about the Sox future. We asked the players, coaches, execs, and alum those same questions on 310 to left. Catch TC on there, catch Alex Spear, catch Lou Merloni, Will Middlebrooks, plenty of names throughout NESN and the Red Sox. You can find it on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, Amazon, wherever else you get your podcasts. All right. Second week in a row, we got an F1 race review. Chinese Grand Prix. Boring race, very unboring aftermath.
I was going to say, not all boring.
I was excited to talk Oscar Piastri. I was excited to talk Max Verstappen. I was even excited to talk Haas because I'm so impressed that they had guys finish where they did, pulling those tractors in the big jump they've made. But it all starts with Ferrari getting a double DQ. First time this has happened in 75 years. Lewis Hamilton was disqualified for his skid board being below regulation. We'll get into the info on that. And then Charles Leclerc, the car being underweight. Pierre Gasly was also disqualified for Alpine. Same thing, car was underweight. So everything's in kilograms weight-wise in F1. Car has to be 800 kilograms at the end of the race without the gas. Charles Leclerc was 799 kilograms, disqualified. Lewis Hamilton's a more interesting one. His skid board was 0.5 millimeters below regulation. So if you're watching or listening, pull out your wallet, grab your driver's license, hold it sideways. That is basically how short it was from being under regulation. And for that reason, Lewis Hamilton got a DQ. They both finished in the top 10. That's a lot of points that Ferrari's missing out on.
Yeah, this was a 5th and a 6th slot taken away from these two guys.
18 points.
18 crucial points.
Yep.
Because they didn't start the season how they wanted to. There's all this pressure around Hamilton performing now that he is with Ferrari, now that he's reunited with certain coaches and whatnot. They thought that the communication mishaps and the shifting mishaps in Melbourne were going to be, the last and the least of the drama around Ferrari, and then you get these DQs. Mm-hmm. The worst part about it is to see how excited Hamilton was. A historic sprints race for Ferrari.
They're lucky he recovered points there.
Are you kidding me? And then he gets on the stage. He's sitting between Verstappen and I believe it was Lando. And he's like, I don't remember what this feeling's like. Or I don't know what this feeling's like. The joy around him feeling like he actually has a season ahead of him. And then this happens.
I know.
By a license that by what you just explained there.
Yeah.
The pinch.
And it's a wooden plank too. It's so funny. These like $20 million machines. It's a piece of wood.
Of all things.
And it is something that the reason that rule is in there is because you can't have the car too low to the ground because everything's aerodynamics with these. And if it's that low, then you're just fighting that much less air. You're getting that much less resistance. And it's just, again, to provide parity. But for him winning the sprint race, he still got 8 points. Ferrari's so lucky for that.
So lucky. So lucky, because then the next topic of conversation that comes into this is that if I'm Ferrari, and you and I talked about it last time we got to chat F1, I'm heading into this Grand Prix and I'm like, this track is built for our players. I mean, our racers. This track is built for our cars. And it is, because people were not expecting McLaren to have such a clear route on any of this because their cars are usually built for a lot of those windier routes, those heavier turns, and they were able to perform well on those straight liners. And so Ferrari being discounted by that small bit, it just asks you, how many more mistakes is Ferrari going to make during this? Because when there was any conversation about Hamilton going to Ferrari, it was like, could he manage in that car? Is he finally going to get the car that he deserves? Now you come in, you have communication issues, and now you have this underweight issue and then the plank situation. Like, it's just too messy of a start.
And they're now 61 points behind McLaren. They have 78 because of how well they did. And the difference of these DQs is them being 1 point behind Red Bull for third place, who is struggling on their own, Liam Lawson. We'll talk about that. Instead, they're tied with Williams at 17 points on the season. Australian Grand Prix really ruined the start to their season. Then they have this. And it's just, what goes into it too, it's Ferrari. Like, we've seen the negligence on their strategy with tires in a race and just pit stops and just the misplanning of double boxing when they shouldn't be, and what they've gone through with Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz. Now you have Lewis Hamilton. And that is the second fastest car on the grid. And they wasted away like this. The one that stinks for Leclerc, now this was a potential two-stop race. Ferrari did it once. And it simply was, if they did a second stop, maybe if Charles Leclerc pitted a lap or two later and those tires were just not as worn down, he easily would have had the kilogram or two needed
to make weight.
Exactly. But that's a point of, you only do one change. You only change the tires once. And you do at the point of the race. Got them to where they were in that position, but it cost them in this one. That's a tough one to stomach. And that is one where they're going to look back. The Lewis Hamilton one, though, and when you get to a sprint race weekend, is everything's changing quick. Like, he did good in the sprint race. They made a switch before qualifying. It didn't work out. They tried to make another switch before the race. And that's what may have led to this. And again, it costs them crucial points.
But it's planning. That's like the failed planning is where you want to be shocked with Ferrari, for one. For two, let's just put this into context. I've been a Leclerc gal for quite some time, since he got in. But my thing is, like, seeing where Leclerc's record picks up, it's usually mid to later in the season. So now you're looking at kind of a margin between your driver one and your driver two. You have no margin for error because Leclerc has two top drivers. Piastri's coming into this looking to collect his exactly. So they have the best car. They've got two top drivers in the mix. You're looking at almost a steal in points every time you hit the track. There's a bit of a gap when it comes to Hamilton and Leclerc, and this is with so much love for Leclerc, but his driving doesn't pick up until mid to end season. So you can't lose out on points like this because you're looking at one driver collecting for the team as a whole, and it's not enough to start the season like this. Yeah,
and especially with how well that they've done between Lando and Oscar Piastri. Of course, Lando won the Australian Grand Prix. Oscar Piastri turns around and wins the Chinese Grand Prix, and he got a total of 32 points on the weekend too. So it's beyond winning the race, and that's where they're at. And the Australian Grand Prix kept everything open, and Oscar dominated the race. We even saw that McLaren committed to him to win it as well.
Yeah.
He raced so well from start to finish. Lando is dealing with braking issues as well. He even commented, he's like, I'm lucky I had brakes towards the end. But it's just that gap is so big. And in the best thing possible, McLaren, they're going to have, to your point, like the midpoint of the season, when we're about 12 races in or so, and changes will be made, they're going to have the difficult decision of, okay, who do we go with? Do we go with Oscar? Do we go with Lando to bring home the World Drivers' Championship? That's a lot of pressure. That's a lot of expectations. Ferrari's car is good. You think they get it back on track? George Russell's driving phenomenal with a inferior Mercedes car. And if Red Bull can get something out of their second driver, the way Max is pushing that machine too,
margin,
that's a one. And so they'll have the choice of 25-year-old Lando, who has 130 career races, or 23-year-old Oscar, who has 48 career races. But I know when you talk to people around the sport, the potential, a lot of people look at Oscar as like the one.
Yeah.
McLaren has by far the best car. They won the Constructors last year. They again have the fastest car. They're in a great position right now. And it was great to see what they've done, where you get Lando winning it last week, a double podium finish this week, and carrying it on that way.
Yeah, that is going to be the tough question, and it's funny because it takes me back to last season where they had that bit of a botch race where it was like Piastri was clear to like be their guy to collect the points on that one, and then Lando kind of had a bit of a tissy fit because he's the one who got off to the faster start. He basically paved the way for Piastri, and Piastri was able to like take advantage of the clearing. With that being said, I think because of the narrow miss of points of Lando being on the heels of Verstappen, like I think that as a club they're going to make sure that Lando's in a more promising position to like take what he deserves this year. It's not just the experience. The difference between him and Piastri, weirdly enough, even though there's a little bit of an age gap, so minute. Piastri drives like he's been doing this for 25 years.
Yeah, he's so
really smart out there.
Yeah.
He's so even-keeled. He's really smart. He has a really good line of communication with his team. And I think that that's where, if it comes down to it and the races get too close, they're going to want the, I don't know, wise beyond his years and that even kill temper for Piastri, because there's some miscues that Lando tends to bite on in certain races.
Yeah.
He had a couple of them in this previous race. So when you're looking at the guy who's going to be able to kind of like consistently get you further, Piastri's making a really large case right now.
Yeah, and that's where we know Lando, the pressure has gotten to him in the past, but he's even corrected his shortcomings. Like last year, all the podiums he had and he blew them. That's not happening this year. He's having really good starts from the jump of the race,
True.
Fighting off the drivers behind them. That's where, again, I can't make a read on McLaren yet, and we won't be able to even make a read on Red Bull or Mercedes or Ferrari at this point. It's going to have to be later in. But McLaren, they have the cushion, even thinking of what Verstappen has done, for him to have the fourth fastest car on the grid, and he's in second place only behind Lando for the leader in the driver standings by 8 points as well. Like, he's doing so good.
He's so hard to keep out of the mix.
Yeah.
He's so hard to keep out of the mix. I think that, again, just from a team perspective, the drop off between him and the driver coming up behind him is going to be different. Where McLaren is also kind of going to continue to take a leap here is Lando's really good at defensive driving. Like, if it comes down to it and they head into a race and they think, okay, Lando gives off to a quick start, Piastri manages all the details in between, like, he's a really good defensive driver and hard to get around when it makes it clear that Piastri is going to hit the podium for them. So I would say right now, not only having the best car, but just kind of having the best approach to these tracks. It just saddens me because I was so excited for Ferrari's season with Hamilton, but that conversation around the car, it's just getting louder and louder because you can't have like dumb mistakes, and it's deflating to a guy like Hamilton who's already coming in this with so much pressure on his shoulders. But maybe he could still ride the high of the sprint and see what takes place next. I think, what do they have? Japan coming up.
Japanese Grand Prix is next, and there'll be a break. There needs to be an opening for McLaren. I just don't see them making a mistake.
No.
That's the thing of their car is so far ahead already, they couldn't afford a weekend like this. And
No.
and the double DQ is what's so damning.
If it was one of the Ferrari racers,
especially the weight of Charles Leclerc, like that happens sometimes. It literally happened to Pierre Gasly in the same race, but the double DQ is what kills them. To at least be in the mix for the constructors, because they were right there. They just missed out on winning the constructors. And here's the thing too of Red Bull. Let's get into that conversation. Liam Lawson again did not perform well.
Yeah.
Now he did do better. He went from a DNF in Australia, was supposed to finish 15th, finished 12th after the DQs of Gasly, Hamilton, and Leclerc. But Yuki Tsunoda is driving the V-Car really well. And for as challenging as his Red Bull car is, like if he takes that jump for them and how well Max is driving, that is Red Bull taking advantage of. Now Ferrari team well behind them, but just to be right behind for if McLaren makes a slip up. Is that best for Liam Lawson though? I don't know.
It's probably not, but I will say this. The trajectory of Yuki's career, he's right on track to make noise right now. He actually, one of his F1 training coaches was formerly Mike Italiano. He was with Danny Ricciardo. And that was when Danny was in his prime in terms of like, you know, healthy, maxing out on these big races and stuff like that. And Yuki, I heard, has just been like a tremendous translator into like figuring out his racing style and rising to the occasion. So kind of having Danny's old coach, they've been working together for a handful of years now silently. Like, I think the expectation is that it's Yuki's breakout season for sure. And
even Red Bull going into this race, they had Liam Lawson start from pit lane instead of on the grid. And that was because they had to do so many changes to his setup for his car. They're trying to figure him out. And this is a guy that did P20 and then before that had P18, like even in the qualifying time. And he's over a minute behind Max. Ooh. Like that's where he did the upgrade. I mean, from a straight DNF, but like to finish 12th is still good. But it's for him, it's just such a big struggle. And that's what doesn't make sense. To be a minute off the pace from a Max Verstappen, to be off, anyone would be that, but a minute off of the same car, essentially, it's hard to figure out. But as Liam Lawson, if he continues to improve, then maybe he's figuring the car out. You don't want to pull the plug too early and shatter his confidence. But this is Yuki about to be in his 5th year as a driver. Liam Lawson now has 11 races under his belt. It was questionable why they gave that seat to Liam Lawson instead of Yuki Tsunoda. I wouldn't be shocked if Yuki makes the jump from V-Carb to Red Bull, and then you let Liam Lawson still race and figure it out. It didn't make sense before. It's certainly questionable right now. If you're liking the F1 Talk, hey, make sure to catch Boston Has Entered the Chat 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, wherever you get your podcast, Spotify, Apple, Amazon Prime. You can also watch on Nessun's YouTube page, Facebook, and Twitch as well. And one quick observation I got to point out. Haas did great. Ayo Komatsu, he is their new principal. He went from a trackside engineer. He's been with the team since 2016. Those are very slow cars. And for them to have Esteban Ocon take 5th and Oliver Behrman, a rookie, take 8th, double points from Haas is insane to think of.
Yeah. So. I'm not leaping on too much credit for some of these teams only because, again, you're talking about more straightaway like on this track.
Chinese Grand Prix was very straightforward.
Bahrain is going to be a challenge. Miami is going to be a challenge. And this is where we're going to see how well these cars actually stack.
These Haas cars were terrible. Now they're good. Hey, she's Kasey Hudson. I'm George Balekji. This is Boston Has Entered the Chat. Appreciate you guys making us a part of your day. We'll see you guys next time.